While we're waiting, are there any questions from yesterday? Yeah?
So, Bukhari and Muslim, what was the difference between their
No problem. We're just sitting here anyway. So the question is, what was the difference between the era or the time of Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim? They were contemporaries. They lived at approximately the same time. Imam Bukhari passed away in the year 256 after Hijrah. Imam Muslim passed away in 261, so just like 5 years after him. So they lived at the same time. Imam Muslim actually acquired hadith from Imam Bukhari. He studied under Imam Bukhari. He accompanied him on his journeys and stuff, so they're contemporaries. This book that we're studying right now is a later collection of hadith. So there's primary collections of hadith and secondary collections. So a primary collection would be something that was authored in the era in which people were compiling hadith together with their chains of narration. So for example, Imam Bukhari would go from person to person and collect a hadith, and he eventually put all those hadith that he collected, the authentic ones that he found from them, he put them in a book. And that's known as a primary collection of hadith, because when we look at it, it has the chains of narration back to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, if me or you wanted to compile a book of hadith, we wouldn't necessarily really be able to do it the same way, with the same degree of practicality. Our compilation of hadith, if we were to compile one, would be we would find a hadith from different books, and then we might put them together through that. So we live in sort of an era that's past the era of transmission, right? We live in a post-transmission era. So any work of hadith that's authored in that era is known as a secondary source. So any work of hadith that doesn't have the chains of narration in it, back from the author to the Prophet ﷺ, would be known as a secondary source. So for example, this book that we're studying over here, Mishkat al-Masabih, is a secondary source, because the authors lived in the 500s and the 700s, which is many centuries after the era of transmission. And then they're not compiling a hadith with their chains of transmission back to the Prophet ﷺ, but rather they're just collecting it from different books. That's why you see at the end of Mishkat, at the end of each hadith, it says that this hadith is in Bukhari or Muslim or something of the sort. So this is a secondary source, not a primary source. Sorry, that wasn't your question, but I just thought that. Yeah.
So there's a gap for hadith.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, for participation, I think you were saying that actually the chain is there.
So the chain exists for hadith as well. Yeah, the chain exists for both Quran and hadith. We can discuss it afterwards, inshallah. Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa barik wa sallim. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Okay, so inshallah we're going to continue on today from where we left off yesterday. As you can see, Mishkat al-Masabih, Kitab al-Fitan. I got some feedback yesterday that the display wasn't so clear due to the color scheme that I had chosen. So I hope today it's more visible, hopefully. Okay. So now today we're actually not going to cover so many ahadith. We'll cover one or two, but those ahadith require a lot of explanation. They're a bit complicated, so we'll go through them. But before that, I just thought it would be wise to sort of motivate the discussion. Why don't we discuss some fitnas that exist in our time that we might be experiencing ourselves? So I put a bunch up here, but they're all in Arabic, so you can't really cheat. So I'd like to hear from you first. So you tell me, we mentioned a few yesterday, let's hear a few more. What are some fitnas of our time? And then I'll share with you the list that I have up here, and then we can just discuss it, inshallah. So what are some fitnas that we might experience today? We heard some yesterday, but we can maybe add some more just to refresh our memories. Let's hear it again. Islamophobia, okay, that works. Anything? Okay, yeah, nakedness. What was the second thing? Gender what? Oh, gender confusion. Yeah, that's a big one. Okay, sometimes it's offensive to assume someone's gender, right? So that's a big thing. It didn't really exist maybe even 5-10 years ago. No, it's prevalent today now. It's getting more prevalent. Anything else? Sorry? Shia Sunni, okay. That, it's not a new fitna, but it's definitely a fitna that exists, right? What else? Wealth? Okay, yeah, that works as well. Wealth is something that actually it's a fitna that can sometimes even be greater than the fitna of poverty. It depends on the person, but in a hadith the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ma al-faqru akhsha alaykum." I don't necessarily fear for you poverty. وَلَكِنْ أَخْشَى عَلَيْكُمُ الدُّنْيا أَن تُبْسَطَ عَلَيْكُمْ كَمَا بُسِطَتْ عَلَى مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ. Rather, I fear for you the dunya, that it's opened up for you, and then you begin competing in it. So wealth is definitely a big trial. Okay, all those are big fitnas as well. Electronics, video games, sports, they're all big distractions. Interest, yes, interest is very, very prevalent today. Interest is in riba. It's very prevalent today, and it's sometimes it's definitely much more difficult to avoid in our society than it was perhaps in the past in pre-modern societies. Okay, what else? One more, and then I'll share with you my list. Drugs, yeah, that works too. Drugs is also a big fitna. And unfortunately, many Muslims fall prey to this as well. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. Okay, so now this is a list that actually my teacher that I studied Mishkat al-Musabih under, he had, so I just put these on. So one of them is فِتْنَةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي نَفْسِهِ بِأَنْ يَقِسَ قَلْبَهُ فَلَا يَجِدُ حَلَاوَةَ الطَّاعَةِ. That a person finds fitna in himself, that his heart becomes hard. And then now when he's praying, when he's performing acts of ibadat, he's not finding any pleasure in it. He's not tasting the sweetness of it. And this is something maybe all of us can relate to at some level or another, that we might find that we're doing acts of ibadah, we want to enjoy it, but we're simply not able to experience it the way we want to. Or sometimes we want to do acts of ibadah, but we simply can't bring ourselves to do it. Right? So that's a fitna that happens to people on a personal level. Another one, فِتْنَةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي أَهْلِهِ وَمَالِهِ وَوَلِدِهِ. So sometimes people have fitnas in their family. Sometimes children become a source of fitna for the parents. We hear many parents that are very worried about their children. Their children might be disrespectful to them, or their children might not be on deen, or might not be doing anything that they want, or there's a constant conflict. Or sometimes among spouses, or between spouses. Person might have marital issues. This is something that's increasingly common in our day and age. And fitna regards to a person's wealth, which could either be fitna of excessive wealth or lack thereof. If a person doesn't have any wealth, that's also a fitna as well. Right? So these are all examples of fitnas that occur on a personal level. Allah Ta'ala says in Surah Furqan, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. Allah Ta'ala says that we made some of you a source of fitna for others. What does that mean? That means Allah Ta'ala is saying that some of us, meaning us people, we're fitnas. And how could that be? Because some people are a source of fitna for others. We can just see in our interactions with our family members, perhaps with our friends, with our parents, with our children, sometimes we encounter situations in which it's very difficult to do the right thing. It's very difficult to withhold our anger. It's very difficult to not lash out. It's very difficult to remain kind in the face of rudeness. These are all fitnas. Allah Ta'ala is testing us. So Allah Ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً. We made some of you a fitna for others. Then Allah Ta'ala very interestingly says, أَتَصْبِرُونَ. So are you going to have patience? Are you going to be patient? وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. Allah is ever watchful over you. That means that these difficulties that we have in our interaction with others, or maybe others find difficulty in interacting with us, this is actually a test from Allah. This is a fitna. Allah Ta'ala is saying that I put this in place, أَتَصْبِرُونَ, to say, are you going to have patience or not? And then Allah Ta'ala reminds us, وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. Allah is ever watchful over you. So this is a very good ayah to keep in mind. We should read it repeatedly, reflect over it, and try to keep it in mind. Because every time we're in a difficult interaction, we want to do something which might not be the best. We can remember that وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. Allah Ta'ala is ever watchful over you. So this is a fitna on a personal level that probably each and every one of us experience at some level. So we must ask Allah Ta'ala that He allow us to succeed in this fitna that all of us probably experience at some level or another. Okay, fitna. Okay, I'll go through this fast because there are a lot of them. فِتْنَةٌ تَمُوجُ كَمَوْجِ الْبَحْرِ وَهِيَ فَسَادُ تَدْبِيرِ الْمَدِينَةِ. So this is a fitna that hits like a tsunami, you can say it like that. And it's basically a fitna that encompasses everyone. What is that? Fitna of bad politics, right? Fitna of crisis of leadership. Fitnatun mustatira wa hiya taghayyurun nasi min al-insaniyya. Okay, maybe this doesn't happen so much. Maybe in terms of behavior. So this is a fitna that people, they basically leave their very nature of being human. So it happened sometimes throughout history in a literal sense, but it also happens metaphorically as well. Meaning that if people leave the values which humans uphold, values of modesty, values of decency, then they're kind of leaving these human values. Okay, maybe I should skip some of these. The next one mentions fitnas of tornadoes, of natural disasters, basically. Fitna of a lack of trust amongst people, not being able to trust people, there being deception, that's very common. Fitna of people lying. Not only lying in daily interaction, but lying about deen as well, lying about hadith, lying in terms of religion. So there's a lot of these things. You know, I won't read all of them, I'll just read a few of them. One of fitnat al-ta'ammuq fi ta'wilati mutashabihat al-Qur'an. This is a fitna of people going too deep in interpreting certain ayat of Qur'an that are not meant to really be discussed so much. There's certain ayat of Qur'an that Allah Ta'ala has we're required to believe in them as they are. We don't really go into too much interpretation because the task that Allah Ta'ala has given us is just to believe in these as they are. Right? Allah Ta'ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابِ مِنْهُ آيَاتٌ مُحْكَمَاتٌ. Allah Ta'ala has revealed the book. Some of the verses of it are very clear. They're clear-cut. وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَةٌ هُنَّ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَةٌ. Some other verses are kind of unclear. They're more ambiguous. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ. As for those who have crookedness in their hearts, فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ. They go and they try to interpret these ayat that are not meant to be interpreted. For example, ayat in which Allah Ta'ala discusses Himself, right? Discusses that Allah Ta'ala has, you know what, it's going to be a long discussion, but let me just leave it at that. If someone wants more detail, then they can see me afterwards. But certain ayat are not meant to be interpreted so deeply. So people going into these ayat and then trying to interpret them, and they end up misguided. Fitnatu shuyu'i sabb as-salaf as-salih. Fitna of people disassociating themselves from their pious predecessors. So our pious predecessors are those who have transmitted this deen to us, right? When we read through a hadith, we see the chain of transmission, that these are the people through whom the deen has passed to until it has gotten to us. Now, if we disassociate ourselves with all of these people that have transmitted the deen to us, then we're disassociating ourselves with our understanding of our deen. So there's many more, but we'll just leave it at that. The last one, fitnatu tasallut al-ashrari ala riyasa. Fitna of having bad leadership. The worst of people become leaders. No need for further detail on that. I think that's self-explanatory. Okay. Now the question is, there are all these fitnas. There's some that you mentioned, some that I had up on the slide. Now the question is, what are we supposed to do about it? Okay, so before I say this, again, it's in Arabic, so even if you're looking at it, for most it's okay. It's not cheating because, it's in Arabic. But, okay, so you tell me some of the solutions. What can we do? Sorry? Seek guidance from the Prophet ﷺ, of course, right. So that's why one of the reasons that we're studying this book, Kitab al-Fitan. To seek guidance to find out how to conduct ourselves in these trying times. Okay, what else? Give sadaqah, okay, that's a good thing. Any form of ibadah is an act of connecting ourselves with Allah Ta'ala, so that's always good to do. Anything else? Spend time in good company, that's very important. Right, spend time in good company. And there's more too. So there's a few of the pieces of guidance that the Prophet ﷺ advised throughout different ahadith. One of them is فَأَمَرَهُمْ بِالْإِعْتِزَالِ. So the Prophet ﷺ said that if it's such a trying time in which everyone is being tested and you're being pulled in a certain direction and then you can't necessarily resist that, then the best thing to do is just to stay away from everyone. Just stay in your houses, right? So in these very trying times, in the situations that are described in hadith, one of the best things to do, if you can't avoid it any other way, you just stay away from everyone. If there's fighting, then you have to كف اليد إذا وقع القتال بين المسلمين, that you desist from any fighting, right? If there's internal fighting amongst Muslims, then you make sure that you're not participating in that. Okay, I'm not going to read all of them, but the last one, فأمرهم, this is the very last one, فأمرهم أن يعلموا أن الموت خير لهم من حياتهم. That the Prophet ﷺ said that if the situation gets so bad that you don't feel like you can do anything else, then at least know that this life is temporary, right? If there's, for example, I don't know, war going on in your town, in your country, if there's genocide, and you see all your relatives dying, and there's such a trying, tough situation, then at least know that this life is temporary. That whatever, the akhirah, the next life that's to come, is much better for you. So although you might be undergoing difficulty in this life, at least know that inshallah there's comfort that awaits. So these are a few pieces of advice that the Prophet ﷺ offered. Now, that's just some general stuff. Actually, I was to mention this yesterday, but we didn't get to it, so that's why I mentioned it today. Okay, now let's get to the hadith. This is our main hadith for discussion today. So I'll read it in Arabic, then we'll go through the translation, and then we can discuss it, inshallah. Okay. عن حذيفة رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول. Hudayfa radiallahu anhu said that I heard the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, تعرض الفتن على القلوب كالحصير عودا عودا. That fitnas will be presented before people, they'll be put before people just like a mat, with stick after stick. What does that mean? Inshallah, we'll discuss. فأي قلب أشربها نكتت فيه نكتة سوداء. That any heart that's infused with these fitnas, so these fitnas are going to be presented before people. Any heart that takes these fitnas in, then there's a black dot that's put on the heart. وأي قلب أنكرها نكتت فيه نكتة بيضاء. And any heart that is presented with these fitnas, but rejects them, then a white dot is put on. So what's the situation so far? Fitnas are going to be presented before everyone. If you succumb to the fitnas, then you get black dots put on your heart. But if you resist the fitnas, then your heart becomes white. حتى يصير على قلبين. To the extent that people will end up with two types of hearts. أبيض مثل الصفاء. Some people will have hearts that are so white, they're like white polished stone. فلا تضره فتنة ما دامت السماوات والأرض. And these people will become so immune to fitnas that no fitna will ever harm them as long as the heavens and the earth last. As long as the heaven and the earth last. So basically this person now is totally immune to fitnas. والآخر أسود مربادا كالكوز مجخيا لا يعرف معروفا ولا ينكر منكرا إلا ما أشرب من هواه. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. So it says that people will end up with two types of hearts. Some people will have these white hearts that become so white they're like polished stone, they're immune to any fitnas. Other people, unfortunately, they're going to end up with black hearts that are ashy. Okay? Now the Prophet ﷺ, he brings up an analogy to help drive home this point of how this heart will be. So he says, كَالْكُوزِ مُجَخِيًا. Arabic is kind of difficult, it's not like common words that are used, but it means like this person's heart will be like a glass that's upturned, a glass that's overturned. لَا يَعْرِفُ مَعْرُوفًا. He won't be able to recognize anything as good. Anything good, he won't be able to recognize as good. وَلَا يُنْكِرُ مُنْكَرًا. Anything bad, he won't see as bad. So we see that this person's perception has been completely warped. إِلَّا مَا أُشْرِبَ مِنْ هَوَاهُ. The only thing he'll be able to recognize is that which his desires dictate to him, his own whims. That's all he'll be able to recognize. Okay, does everyone understand this so far? Is there any unclarity on it? Okay, so just to summarize, fitnas will be presented before people. Some people will succumb to the fitnas, they'll end up with black hearts, such that they can't recognize right from wrong anymore. Other people will end up with white hearts, such that their hearts are very pure and they become immune to fitnas. That's the gist of it. Does everyone understand that? Okay. So now, the question that arises now is, what fitna is the Prophet ﷺ talking about over here? What do you think? Okay. Oops, accidentally I said it already. What fitna, without looking, what fitnas are being referred to? Can someone who hasn't yet seen it tell me? What fitnas do you think are being referred to? Fitnas that are going to be presented before the hearts. What type of fitna is that? Opposite gender? Okay, that works. I mean, that's a good guess. Doubts. Okay, yeah, that's more of what I was looking for. Doubts, desires, okay, that works too, but I was looking more for doubts. A lot of the commentators say that this is a fitna of belief, a fitna of aqidah. And this is perhaps one of the greatest fitnas in our time. This is something that we all need to try to take as many measures as we can to secure ourselves from, first of all, and also our children and our families as well. So one thing is that, unfortunately, nowadays we see many people who outright say that they don't want to have anything to do with the deen anymore. They renounce the deen. That's unfortunately the state of some people. Right? I'm sure everyone, unfortunately, almost probably everyone knows someone or another, a friend, family member, someone who doesn't really associate with the deen anymore. Right? Hopefully, well, hopefully not actually, but probably. I meant to say probably. Okay, that's the unfortunate circumstance that we live in. But now some people might not outright denounce the deen, but they adopt such heretical beliefs that technically some of those beliefs will put them outside of the fold of Iman. Okay, so somebody says that, well, na'udhu billah, someone might say that, these verses of Quran, I don't accept that. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't believe in that. Well, that's problematic, very problematic, because we're required to believe in every verse of the Quran. Allah Ta'ala says right at the beginning of the Quran, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ. Those that believe in everything. Ma in Arabic is am, meaning that it's encompassing. Those that believe in everything that has been revealed to you. So if somebody dismisses some of the revelation, even if it be one or two parts, then their iman is in question, because we have to accept everything, right? So someone might not outright denounce the faith, but they might adopt such heretical beliefs, maybe even subconsciously, that it puts their faith in question. And this is a huge fitna, because now how many people can say that we probably know someone who has some sort of weird belief or another? Probably many of us, which is the unfortunate case. So now this fitna that many of the commentators explain, that this is a fitna of aqidah. Okay? So let's discuss this a little bit. Fitna of aqidah. What are some examples of it? One example that I put is questioning Quranic rulings. Okay, and then underneath that, as you can see, you can see the mouse, great. Okay, questioning Quranic rulings. Underneath that, you can see that I just wrote examples. I didn't actually write examples themselves, I just wrote the word example. The reason is because I want to hear the examples from you. What are some examples that we might have encountered from others of people maybe questioning certain Quranic rulings? Can someone give me an example? Hijab, okay, that's a very good one. People say, hijab, na'udhu, someone might say, hijab doesn't make sense to me. I believe I can be very modest without covering myself. They're questioning the ruling that's in the Quran, right? What else? Yeah. Okay, yeah, non-believers not getting Jannah. So this is something that many Muslims are very sort of apologetic about and very hesitant to really say. This issue of salvific exclusivity, this exists in every religion pretty much, most religions. That most religions will say that followers of other religions aren't eligible for salvation. And Islam, for the most part, is no different. If somebody is not following Islam, وَمَن يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَن يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ. If somebody is following a deen other than Islam, then it's not accepted from him. So now, but we might be very hesitant to say that. So if someone says that, I think everyone is okay as long as you're a good person, well, that kind of goes against the teachings of Islam. What about the Prophet ﷺ? What about everything that he did, everything that he brought? By doing that, by saying something like that, everyone is okay, we're sort of like insulting the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's something that's another example. What else? Yeah? Okay, separation of men and women, it ties into hijab, which what was mentioned before, but yeah, that's also a good one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very good, mashallah. So he's saying that there's many people, unfortunately, many acts of ibadat, many of the core pillars of faith, they deny or they question. They say, oh, I believe in my heart. I remember Allah in my heart. Why do I need to pray? So things like that. So these are all fitnas of aqidah. When a person questions a Quranic ruling, essentially Allah Ta'ala has given us the Quran and we accept the Quran. And in doing so, what we're doing is we're saying that we recognize that our intellects are limited. Allah Ta'ala is the creator of ourselves and also the creator of our intellects as well. So Allah Ta'ala hence has wisdom much beyond what we understand. So if Allah Ta'ala says something, then we do it because, regardless if we understand the wisdom or not, we know that Allah Ta'ala is telling us to do it, so we must do it. And Allah Ta'ala, in many things we can understand the wisdom too. But now if we say, no, that doesn't make sense to me, I'm not going to accept that, then what we're saying is that essentially we know better than Allah Ta'ala in regards to whatever particular issue is in discussion. So this is very dangerous because if a person rejects a certain ruling of the Quran or a certain verse of the Quran, or at least the message contained therein, their iman is in question. Right? So questioning Quranic rulings. That's you guys mentioned some examples. Very good. Okay. Here's another one. It kind of ties into some things that you mentioned before. Striving to be politically correct sounding Muslims. You want to sound politically correct. So then many of us want to do this, but in doing so, sometimes we compromise tenets of our faith. Sometimes we adopt an apologetic approach. Right? Can someone give me some examples? Sorry? Polygamy, yeah, polygamy works. Okay, the Quran explicitly permits polygamy. So we accept it because that's what Allah Ta'ala has told us is acceptable. Not to say that every single person needs to practice polygamy. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. But that doesn't mean that you can, if you don't want to do it yourself, that's fine. That doesn't mean that we deny the institution. Because Allah Ta'ala has allowed for it. And by being Muslim, we're submitting to the will of Allah. We're saying that Allah Ta'ala knows better than we do. Right? So if in certain societies, certain places, it's very commonly practiced. And for those people, they don't have any difficulty in practicing it. Allah Ta'ala has allowed it. Okay, so striving to be politically correct sounding Muslims. Polygamy is one example. What else? Okay, good. Islam is equal to peace. Okay, so can you explain a little bit further? Why is that good or bad? Very good, yeah, mashallah. So people say Islam means peace. Islam is equal to peace. Well, is Islam a peaceful religion? Generally speaking, yes. Does that mean that Islam disallows anyone to take up arms when the circumstance arises? No. So if we say that Islam is completely peaceful, it doesn't allow for, essentially we're saying that it doesn't allow for any armed resistance. Which, if we were to read the Quran, if we were to read the Seerah, we would basically have some sort of cognitive dissonance because we would have this notion in our minds that there's no fighting whatsoever allowed in Islam. But just like any society will allow for armed resistance, this country has obviously an army, Department of Defense, because it recognizes, any country will recognize that there are certain circumstances that arise in which a country might need it to take up armed defense or armed resistance. And then similarly, Islam also recognizes this institution. It's not the default, but in certain scenarios, the need arises. So now if we say that Islam is completely equal to peace, there's no fighting whatsoever, then if we read some parts of the Quran, Surah Tawbah, we read some parts of the Seerah, we see the Prophet ﷺ going and fighting in battles, we'll definitely have some internal struggle that goes on. So yeah, that's another one. Very good. Anything else? Yeah? Yeah, very good. Okay, homosexuality. So this is something that we can see, like sort of the effects of like the development of our modernist society before our eyes. Maybe not for the younger ones, but at least for me. When I was in school, I remember when I was in 5th grade, if a kid was acting dumb, or he said something unintelligent, or he did something bad, then people would be like, "You're so gay." Like, it was basically a tool to ridicule someone. But now it's become like something that people are proud of. And if you were to say that, if you were to mock someone for being homosexual, then it would be very politically incorrect. So that's another thing. We can see how society has progressed even before our eyes, the perspective of society in regards to this particular issue. So yeah, so does Islam allow for homosexuality? The Quran is very clear. It doesn't. Does that mean that if somebody is homosexual, then we're going to shun them and that they're not allowed to accept Islam? No, just like any other sin. So if somebody is Muslim but he has inclinations towards the opposite gender, maybe outside of marriage. So he's married but he's attracted to someone else, or he's in a relationship. Do we shun that person? No, we try to help them. We try to guide them if they approach us for guidance. We say that, maybe you should be loyal to your wife, or you should seek counseling, or whatever the case is. But just like that, if somebody is somebody is attracted to the same gender, then we'd say that, well, they're performing a great sin. That doesn't necessarily take them outside of the fold of Islam. Now, the difference, though, is that if somebody denies the institution of Islam's rejection of homosexuality, somebody says that Islam condones or approves homosexuality, then they would essentially be denying verses of the Quran that are very clear. So that would actually put their iman in question. So this is another fitna that we see that's very apparent in our times. That's a fitna tu'radu ala al-qulub, a fitna that's presented before the hearts. Okay, anything else before we move on to the next one? Politically correct? Okay, yeah, equality of genders. Yeah, that's a good one. Abortion, yeah, there you go. That's another one too. So now, as I've sort of been alluding to, living in this society, we kind of take like the dominant ideology that characterizes like our society, we sort of take it as the default. So some people outwardly exclaim that we're modernists, or we're modernist Muslims. Other people, like many of us, might not outwardly proclaim that, yet we might subconsciously adopt some of the ideals, right? So in our society, many of us, we fall prey to, may Allah Ta'ala protect us, assuming this modernist philosophy as our default. And we view everything else from that vantage point. Let me give you one example. Okay, so this is an example that I got from the internet. Well, in the past, due to religious sentiment, having intercourse outside of marriage, for example, was considered to be wrong. But now times have changed, and we don't find it so bad anymore because we have progressed. This is something that we might hear. It's probably not unfamiliar to many of us because we've heard people say things like this, right? So what are we doing over here? What is someone who makes a statement like this, what are they assuming as their default? What's anchoring them? What society perceives to be acceptable, right? But with us as Muslims, we don't view things from the perspective of what our ever-changing, ever-evolving society views as acceptable. Rather, we view our anchor is Islam. And what Allah Ta'ala has told us is right, then we accept as right. And what Allah Ta'ala has told us is not right, then we accept as not right. If somebody has some misunderstanding about a particular ruling or something, then definitely they should seek guidance. But like as a whole, we accept Islam as our vantage point, as our anchor. Okay, question on Quranic rulings. One more thing that I wanted to mention about that. One example that we commonly hear, some of you might have alluded to it when you said gender equality, is somebody might read the verses of inheritance. Then what's one common objection that comes up when people read the verses of inheritance? Why do men get more than women? So I've heard many Muslims say that, what? Men get twice the amount as women? That's not fair. That's not equality. If someone says something like that, who are they objecting against? They're objecting against Allah Ta'ala, right? So instead of doing that, we might see a verse like this and then we don't understand it. So if we're not understanding it, if we have some question, then the correct code of conduct is to try to seek clarity, not to outwardly reject it, or not to outright reject it, or not to, tell people that this doesn't make any sense. Rather, we seek clarity. We say that we go to someone who's knowledgeable, and we say that this is something that doesn't make sense to me. Is there some wisdom for it? And then if you approach a scholar, the scholar might say, well, in Islam, a woman is not required, she doesn't really have any expense that's required upon her. She's not even required to spend on herself. But men, on the other hand, they're not only required to spend on themselves, but on all their dependents, including on their female dependents, wives, daughters, mothers, things like that. So in that case, the man has a far, far greater expense on his shoulders. So hence, Allah Ta'ala allots him more in inheritance. And if someone says that, does that make sense? Yeah, people will understand that. So, but to go and outright reject it, or to object against it, that's not the approach that we Muslims take. Because by being Muslim, we're submitting to the will of Allah Ta'ala. Okay. Now, these are the type of fitnas that are being referred to. We mentioned some examples just now. We discussed some examples. Now, let's go through the explanation of the hadith. The slide was actually in the back. Let me see if I can go back. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so now in the beginning of the hadith it says, تُعْرَضُ الْفِتَنُ عَلَى الْقُلُوبِ, that fitnas will be presented before the hearts. كَالْحَصِيرِ, like a mat. عُودًا, one stick after another. Now this is, an analogy that many of us might not understand. It requires some explanation. What do you think that might mean? One stick after, fitnas will be presented like a mat. Yeah, in the back. Mm-hmm. Come in that much one? Okay, yeah, there'll be a lot. Okay, that's very good. Okay, so just to visualize it better, I put up a picture of a straw mat. Can you all see that? I'm sure many of us have seen it, straw mats before, but just to visualize. Okay, so what do you see? So what you mentioned was really good, that there's so many fitnas. How many sticks do you see in this? Can someone count? Just joking, don't worry. The point is that we see a lot of sticks, and this is just a small snippet of the mat. So many fitnas will be presented. We just discussed so many of them, that people denying this verse, people denying this idea, this principle of the Quran, so many different things. These fitnas will come, and the fact of the matter is that this is not like new to anyone. The examples that we mentioned just now, like a few minutes ago, was that a novel thing? Did anyone hear those things for the first time? Or have you guys heard those things before, those objections being brought up? Generally speaking, have you heard them before? Yeah. So that's the thing. All these different fitnas, people denying this verse, people denying that thing, saying this part of religion doesn't make sense to me. These are fitnas that come one after another, and there's so many of them. Just like a straw mat has so many sticks. What else? What else might be the reason for the analogy? They're intertwined, yes, because all these fitnas, they sort of like emerge out of the same perspective. If somebody has the perspective that we're adopting sort of what society views to be acceptable as our vantage point, and everything else is viewed in light of that, then it's going to result, when we take that as the default, then that results in so many subsidiary issues becoming tainted through that lens that we put before our eyes, if that makes sense, right? So yes, so they're intertwined as well. So as you can see with these sticks, they are all tied together. Oh, very good. Okay, Zishan counted, there are 46 of them. Okay. Okay, so, okay, that's another one, they're intertwined. What else? Anything else? Oh, it's man-made. Okay, that's a good one. I didn't think of that one myself. But yes, where did these fitnas come from? They emerge from us, from people, from society, right? So these fitnas are man-made. Okay, I didn't think of that one. But okay, let's see. What did I write over here? So what it means, just to recap before we go into the meaning further, that fitnas will be presented before the hearts, like a mat, one stick after another, stick by stick. Okay, meanings. Another meaning is that it envelops them, right? So now this phrase is used in Arabic, as some of the commentaries mention, that if a person has a pot, and then he puts, oftentimes what they would do is they would put a stick on top of the pot, on top of the vessel, right? That would just cover it a little bit. And then they might put another stick, and once they put several sticks, what happens to the lid, or the opening of the vessel? It gets completely covered. So similarly, in a mat, what does it do to the floor? It covers the floor, right? So similarly, these fitnas will be so many that eventually they'll envelop someone. So if somebody, for example, the example that we've been discussing is how this relates to aqidah. Somebody adopts this modernist philosophy. Then there's so many things that arise from that, it'll eventually envelop their thinking. And this ties very well into the hadith. Why? Can anyone remind me what the hadith said that has to do with enveloping? With the heart. Okay, can you elaborate a little bit? Exactly. So the hadith started by saying that the fitna will be one fitna will be presented, and then person either succumbs to it or rejects it. And then in turn, either a black dot or a white dot will be put on the heart. And then this continues again and again until the entire heart is enveloped in blackness or whiteness, right? So eventually it'll envelop the heart, right? So this ties very well into the explanation of the hadith. And then what we were saying about the black heart is that it becomes enveloped so completely that it no longer has the ability to distinguish between right and wrong. So for example, society throughout history has what some of you mentioned about homosexuality. Society has regarded that this is something that's wrong. Or let's take something even more extreme. Incest. I've heard from prominent atheists myself that if somebody asked, I saw in a public forum that somebody asked a prominent atheist about incest. And he's like, well, he was struggling to say it, but he's like, well, you know, if they're both happy, then I don't really see anything wrong with it. Because they have no moral anchor anymore, right? He's like, but then, you know, there might be some like recessive genes that they both have, so then it might cause like some genetic deformities or something, so probably it's better not to, but if there's not, then, you know, I don't really see so much wrong with it. So this is something that society has recognized, some society has condemned throughout history. That is incest a good thing or a bad thing? A bad thing, right? But now when these fitnas are presented, so many of them, in such a great number, that eventually it envelops the heart, and they're no longer able to distinguish between right and wrong anymore. لا يعرف معروفا ولا ينكر منكرا, as the hadith says. Right? So that's what happens. So one meaning, in addition to the meanings that you all mentioned, is that it envelops someone. Anything else before? I think I wrote 2. Anything else? No? Okay. What happens when a person lies down on a straw mat? It leaves marks, right? So then hence all these fitnas, what are they doing? They're leaving marks on your heart, right? It warps your thinking, it warps your perspective, it warps your spirituality, it warps everything. So these are impressing, that's my next thing, it impresses upon the hearts until the hearts are left scarred. They're left with all these black dots, right? So that's another thing. So we mentioned so far, I think, I mentioned 2 and I think you guys mentioned 3 interpretations for this. Okay, so I mentioned it envelops them. That's one stick after another stick, right? Another one, it impresses upon their hearts, because when you lie down on a straw mat, then what happens? Leaves marks. And then can someone remind me of the other ones that we discussed before I put these 2 up? Intertwined, okay, that was another one. And then there were 1 or 2 more. Man-made and? You're on a roll, mashallah. Sorry? Many of them, very good. Many of them. Okay. So this is one reading of the hadith. Udan, udan. Other people read the hadith as audan, audan. Aud means to return. So another reading of the hadith is تعرض الفتن على القلوب عودا عودا. And aud means to return. So what do you think that means? They come one after another, right? Just as one comes, the next one comes after that. They're oft returning. There's no escape from these fitnas, because as soon as you think that, you just encountered one and then now you're done with it, it'll return, it'll hit you again. So these fitnas surround you. And as you can see, if we look at the explanation of the first reading and then this reading, it's pretty similar, right? Okay. Another reading of it is awdan, awdan. Awd means to take refuge. So then according to this reading, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that fitnas will be presented and we take refuge, right? Because these fitnas are things that we need to ask Allah Ta'ala protection from. Okay. So, okay, we did this. Okay, so what is the result of these fitnas? Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the first part of the hadith. He laid out this scenario that these fitnas will be presented before people, as we've been discussing, could refer to fitnas of aqidah, and we gave many examples of that. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes on to elaborate that, we've sort of like discussed already, that any heart that is infused, فَأَيُّ قَلْبٍ أُشْرِبَهَا نُكِتَت, both readings I think, نُكِتَت فِيهِ نُكْتَةٌ سَوْدَاء, that any heart that is infused with these, or that succumbs to these fitnas, then a black dot will be put on. And then any heart that rejects these fitnas, a white dot will be put on. Oops. Okay. And then the Prophet ﷺ says that we're going to be in this scenario. And then people are going to end up with two different types of hearts. Some people have black hearts, completely black. Other people will have white hearts. Okay. And now what is the result of the white heart? So that's what we're all striving for. حتى تصير على قلبين على أبيض مثل الصفا فلا تضره فتنة. The result is that if you end up with this white heart, may Allah Ta'ala grant all of us that you become immune to fitnas. You're so well anchored in Islam, that you're so well anchored in the Sunnah, in the Sharia, that in your love for Allah Ta'ala and your love for the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that you're immune. Nothing else is really going to harm you. So, فَلَا تَضُرُّهُ فِتْنَةٌ. No fitna really harms that person anymore, because they become immune, because their entire heart is now white. So the Prophet ﷺ compares this heart to safa. Safa is a white, sleek stone. Now, what do you think the reason for the comparison is, without looking at the screen? What does a white heart have to do with a stone? No, unfortunately, this is it's just talking about a stone in general. It's not the mountain. But that was a good guess. Sorry? It has no impurity, right? So if you see something that's completely white, then what do you immediately recognize? This is something that's clean, doesn't have any stains on it, it's not sullied by any dirt, by any black specks, right? So that means that it's pure. So a person that has this white heart is pure. Okay, and what else can it refer to without looking at the screen? Okay, I think everyone has already peeked, that's why no one's answering.
I was thinking stone is something strong.
Talking about a white stone that's very polished, that's very sleek. Now, has anyone seen a stone like this? What happens if you try to grab onto it? Your hand might slip. What happens if you try to step on it? There's a chance that you might slip. So what do we learn from this? What's the connection then? Right, okay, so any false ideas, any fitnas that come, they're not able to latch onto this stone. They're not able to latch onto this heart because it's so sleek now, it's protected. It has this protective covering that anything that tries to impede it will just slip off, right? It becomes immune. Okay, now this is referred to, this concept is kind of alluded to in an ayah of the Quran. If anyone is hafid here, can you guess what the ayah is? If you're not hafid, you can still guess, but it might be easier for the hafad. Sorry? Okay, that's a very good guess. That wasn't particularly the ayah that I had in mind, but that is related. Allah Ta'ala mentions in Surah Anfal, this is ayah number 29, if I remember correctly. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِن تَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ فُرْقَانًا. Allah Ta'ala says that, oh, those who believe, if you fear Allah, then Allah Ta'ala will make for you a furqan. Furqan means a criterion, the ability to distinguish between right and wrong. So if we truly have taqwa, so we're all in these trying times, we're surrounded by this fitna of aqidah, we're surrounded by all these doubts. But the goal for all of us is to try to have taqwa, to try to attach ourselves, well, we'll discuss taqwa in a second, but try to have as much taqwa as possible. And in turn, if we strive for this taqwa, then what will Allah Ta'ala do to us as a result, as a reward? Allah will make for us this furqan in our hearts. We'll be able to very easily distinguish between right and wrong. And then things won't be so confusing anymore because we'll just see a fitna, we'll be like, hey, that's wrong. It won't be confusing for us. Right? يَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ فُرْقَانًا, as Allah Ta'ala says. Another dua that we should make often, that the Prophet ﷺ would make, is Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqa warzuqna ittiba'ah wa arina al-batila batila warzuqna ijtinabah. That, oh Allah, show us the truth, let the truth become apparent to us as the truth. Let us see the truth as truth, and let us see falsehood as falsehood. So someone might read this, hear of this dua, read it, and be like, what's the point of that? Isn't that obvious? Well, unfortunately, most of the time, or not most of the time, but some of the time, it's actually not so obvious. That sometimes things are truth and falsehood, but sometimes it's hard for us to distinguish. We can't really tell, is that thing, is it a good thing or a bad thing? It's hard for us. So hence the Prophet ﷺ, recognizing that his ummah would face things like this, would make dua for, to see truth as truth. To let Allah Ta'ala, for Allah Ta'ala to let him see truth as truth, and to see falsehood as falsehood. So this is something that we should also make dua for as well. Inshallah, it'll help us in times of fitna. Okay, so and now another thing. Before I move on to the bad part, which is like people that succumb to the fitnas, is that we can see these fitnas as a time, not just, we don't need to see these fitnas and become discouraged. To say that, oh man, we're living in bad times, it's really hard, like, let's just be sad about it. We don't necessarily need to do that, because rather we can see it as an opportunity. That Allah Ta'ala is presenting us with these fitnas in order to distinguish the good people from the bad people. But it's also an opportunity for us to prove ourselves to Allah Ta'ala, to demonstrate, at least attempt to demonstrate that we want to be amongst the good people. We want to win in this trial. We want to end up on the good side. So it's an opportunity for us to secure that mercy of Allah, the forgiveness of Allah, and becoming these choicy people of Allah Ta'ala, these chosen people of Allah Ta'ala. We have an opportunity when these fitnas are presented before us that we can potentially get a pure, white, clean heart. All we need to do is reject the fitnas as they come to us. And then in turn, Allah Ta'ala will give us this pure, white heart and this ability to, this criterion to distinguish right from wrong. Before we move on, I had said about the ayah, إِن تَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ فُرْقَانًا. If you have taqwa, then Allah Ta'ala will make for you a criterion to distinguish between right and wrong. What does having taqwa mean? Something that I'm sure we've heard many times. Consciousness of Allah Ta'ala. So what does that entail? We do what Allah Ta'ala wants us to do. We stay away from those things that Allah Ta'ala wants us to stay away from. In addition to that, stay away from doubtful matters. If we do all of these, in addition to everything else that falls under the connotation of taqwa, then inshallah, Allah Ta'ala will make for us this furqan. Okay, now, an example to drive it home. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ described about the bad type of person, that he sees these fitnas and he succumbs to it. And then all these black dots end up coming on his heart, such that his heart is completely enveloped, right? Kal hasiri udan udan, like a mat will envelop someone. And then his heart becomes black and ashy. Kal kuzi, and there's different ways of saying this, mujakhiyan, mujkhiyan, different ways of that they've commentaries describe reading it. But basically it means like an overturned cup. Now if somebody has an overturned cup, a cup that's turned to the side or turned upside down, then can you fill it with anything? If you try to put any iman in it, any nur in it, any goodness in it, what's going to happen? It'll just go to the side. It won't go inside, right? So this is the result of succumbing to fitna after fitna. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. To the extent that we don't have, people like this, that may Allah Ta'ala protect us, but people that fall in this category don't have any ability to distinguish right from wrong anymore. Except إِلَّا مَا أُشْرِبَ مِنْ هَوَاهُ. Except whatever his whims dictate to him. They say, well, that doesn't make sense to me. I reject that because I don't accept that. What have they made their criterion for distinguishing right from wrong? People that say things like that. Their own whims, right? So we hear this a lot, and we see that by seeing a hadith like this, And we actually see this happening before our eyes, that people have made their gods, what they worship, what they deem to be right and wrong, whatever either their own whims or the whims of society dictate. We see this happening before our eyes. Okay, so this was this hadith. We have a couple of minutes to move on to the next hadith. I don't think we'll be able to finish it though, but we can at least start it. Before I move on, does anyone have any questions regarding this hadith? Something related to this hadith, not necessarily a general question. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. So he's saying that, but the Hussein is saying that, he heard before that this hadith, the interpretation of it is that it refers to TV. So now one thing that's important, an important principle to understand is that the wordings of the hadith are general. So whenever an ayah or wording is general, or hadith is general in wording, then what we were doing over here is that we were just explaining it, we were attempting to explain it generally. Now the Prophet ﷺ, through like these general words, has sort of outlined principles. That you have these fitnas and such things happen with these fitnas, they're encompassing or they come one after another. Now looking around in our society today, we can see many phenomenon that might fall under the scope of these general words that the Prophet ﷺ said. Right? So if somebody feels that one possible interpretation of the hadith might be TV, then that might fall under the scope of it, right? If he sees that matches up to the description that's described in the hadith. But what probably wouldn't be the most wise thing to do is to say that, to take an interpretation, something that we witness today, and say that this is the only interpretation, right? Not that anyone is saying that, but if the words are general, then we can keep it general, and then anything that falls under that, we can say that this perhaps can apply to the hadith, or the hadith applies to it, right? So then if TV falls under that, then it can fall under that. If it's affecting people, if it's encompassing them, warping their thoughts, all those things that we discussed, then that might fall under that. Okay, so we have 1 minute. I don't know if it's worth it to even begin the next hadith. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll just stop over here because the next hadith is long. Yeah, it's long. Okay, so we'll just stop over there. But okay, if there are any questions, then you're welcome to see me afterwards. Also, we always ask Allah Ta'ala to give us the inspiration to avoid fitnas, that when they're presented before us, that sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish right from wrong. So we ask that Allah Ta'ala give us that criterion and that ability, that nur, internal nur, to distinguish right from wrong and to be able to avoid these fitnas and not succumb to them. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So tomorrow will be an exciting session. We'll discuss a little bit of history. So inshallah, you can look forward to that.